Hello there, everybody. Hallo zusammen, and welcome to this German GCSE and iGCSE video tutorial. So in this particular tutorial, we are going to look at how to answer the shorter writing task, which is, of course, a really important part of the writing paper for most students. Most students will have to do this, and it is very important to know the techniques required, and exactly how to go about answering this writing task. So that's what I'm going to take you through here. First of all, just to introduce myself quickly, I'm Dhananjay Talwar, and I studied modern languages, French and Italian, specifically for my MA degree at the University of Cambridge. I graduated in 2015, and I've been an educator, mostly a tutor, since that time. I've now been tutoring full time for at least 6 years, actually. And I've been lucky enough to help over 500 different students to achieve or exceed their target grade for languages for GCSE or iGCSE exams as a full-time tutor. I've taught a variety of languages, 8 of them so far to GCSE or iGCSE level, and several of those at higher levels too. It's been a very rewarding experience, not least because I love languages myself, and I've learned over 20 of them to different levels, which includes at least 9 to fluency. So a real hobby and passion of mine. And equally, I love to motivate my students, get the best out of them, and make sure that they know the techniques required and ways to get to their target grade. So these are a snapshot of the German GCSE and iGCSE exam boards. So as of September 2025, there are 4 exam boards for GCSE German, 2 for iGCSE German. And as a student, try and be aware, of course, always of which exam board you are studying exactly, because that can guide you as to how to prepare as well. And as you'll see in some of these videos, there can, of course, be some differences from one exam board to the next. So definitely something I recommend being aware of. And today we are, of course, looking at the shorter writing task, which is an important part of the GCSE or iGCSE German writing paper for the vast majority of students. In fact, for any students that are studying any of these exam boards in bold here on this screen. So essentially, just to summarize, that is every single exam board except for CCEA, which is Northern Ireland, which is specific to Northern Ireland in any case. So if you're doing any of the other exam boards at all, then keep watching because this should be very relevant and very useful, hopefully too, for you. So you may well be wondering what the different parts of the German GCSE or iGCSE writing exam are. So of course, I thought I'd take you through that first of all. Definitely, it's worth noting that the exact tasks that you'll have to do depend on your exam board, and they can also certainly depend on whether you're doing foundation tier or higher tier. So again, that's something to make sure that you're aware of as early as possible, ideally. Try and gear yourself towards, try and prepare yourself for the exam that you will face, because there are differences between foundation and higher tier papers, and from exam board to exam board potentially too. The kind of tasks that you may be required to do include a form filling exercise, listing exercise, exercise where you've got to write short sentences in German, where you've got to respond to a stimulus like a photo, and even a brief grammar exercise as well. There can be a shorter writing task or a longer writing task too, and translation from English to German. That is in brackets, that translation at the bottom, because that is actually covered in a separate video where I look at translation specifically. And translation is covered in both directions in that particular video, both English to German and German to English. In terms of the first 5 exercises or tasks listed here, from the form filling exercise down to the grammar exercise, those tend to be shorter, somewhat more formulaic in nature, and require perhaps less practice as well. And so those are not actually covered in these videos. The shorter writing task, of course, is in this particular video, and the longer writing task is also covered in a lot more depth in another video as well. So I highly recommend checking out all of those other videos too to get a full picture of your writing exam. Yeah, and of course, just to confirm today or in this video, we are looking at the shorter writing task. So the shorter writing task is, of course, the shorter of the two, longer of the two writing tasks for the German GCSE or iGCSE writing paper. That's why it's called the shorter writing task. And for the shorter writing task, students would have to write an answer in German, of course, and they would have to address a certain number of bullet points. That is really important. Definitely, it is important to include or to address every single one of those bullet points in your answer. So no matter how many bullet points there are, you must include all of them in your answer and include them roughly equally as well. So I would not write twice as much for one bullet point as you do for another, for example. That is definitely something to avoid and something that can directly lead to you losing marks because there will be marks for, pretty much all exam boards and all levels. There will be marks in the mark scheme for simply addressing as many bullet points, as there are. So make sure to include them all and to include them all roughly equally in your answer. The question itself, and you'll often have a choice of different questions for the shorter writing task. Again, there's a little bit of variation from exam board to exam board, but you do often get a choice of different shorter writing tasks of which you would only have to answer one. The question would always be based on a specific topic area. So that could be, say, the environment, it could be friends and family, it could be school, could be daily routine, many other potential areas as well. If you want to get a full list of the topic areas for your exam board, then make sure to have a look at the website of your exam board too. And that's not a bad idea at all for preparation. And as a student, you would always have a particular number of words, of course, to write. Again, you can look at past papers, the information on your exam board's website to know the number of words that you will have to write. Again, that word indication does vary. It does change from exam board to exam board, and it can certainly change depending on the level as well, whether you're doing foundation or higher tier. But it's good to be aware of that. And no matter how many words you're given to write, it is important to stick roughly to that. I know some teachers may say otherwise, but I would stick within 10% either way of the word count. So if you're told to write 100 words, for instance, I would not write less than, say, 90 and more than about 110. And if you stick within those limits, you should be safe and you should be able to avoid losing marks for that reason, which is a really frustrating way to potentially lose marks if you're doing German GCSE or iGCSE writing paper. It would obviously feel better to lose marks for perhaps more genuine mistakes like the language itself. So genuine language errors rather than just not fulfilling the instructions in terms of the number of words that you've written. And what I would do is actually sit there and count up the exact number of words that you've written, presuming you've got time, of course, in the exam, just to avoid losing marks for that reason. Okay, so these are the exact word limits for the shorter writing task. As I mentioned, they do vary from exam board to exam board, and from foundation tier to higher tier as well. So do make a note of how it will be for you. This is correct for September 2025. But of course, it's not a bad idea at all to keep up to date with the latest papers on your particular exam board's website. So don't hesitate to do that. Definitely good to be aware of these word limits. You'll notice that they do vary quite a bit from one exam board to the next. Okay, here are some of my top tips for how to ace your shorter writing task. So make sure that you always answer every bullet point directly. That is actually really important. It might sound quite basic or even quite formulaic, not even necessarily related to the German that you're writing itself. But there are marks in the mark scheme for doing that specifically. And again, it's a very frustrating and annoying way to lose marks, even if you say produce really good German, but you haven't answered every single one of the bullet points, you would still, of course, be penalized. So make sure that you don't do that. And when you're practicing and revising, just get into the habit of answering every bullet point and making sure that you answer every bullet point more or less equally in terms of importance, in terms of number of words as well. I would actually signal to the examiners as clearly as I can that I have covered every single bullet point For instance, I'd start a new paragraph, as you'll see in the example a bit later, whenever I move on to a new bullet point. And I might use some of the vocabulary that was in that original bullet point itself, just to make sure that the examiner knows that they cannot take marks off for that reason, because I have actually covered every single one of those bullet points. The number of bullet points, the exact number of bullet points can vary again. Sometimes there may be 2 or just 3. Often it can go up to 5. No matter how many there are, you must address every single one of them in your answer. Use topic-specific vocabulary. So particularly if you've been revising the topic-specific vocabulary, which ideally you should do across all the topic areas too, don't leave out any topic areas in your revision, then don't shy away from using it in your shorter writing task. The shorter writing task does tend to be a lot more formulaic and standardized in nature compared to the longer writing task. In the shorter writing task, you actually do not have to hugely vary your language or show off your German too much. Certainly a little bit of variety is good and even required if you want to get up towards the top grades. But you do not have to massively show off and incorporate extremely difficult structures when you're answering the shorter writing task. You could save that for the longer writing task, and more on that in my other video on the longer writing task as well. But topic-specific vocab can be important and useful to boost your marks too. Make sure to use some variety of tenses. The actual bullet points themselves and the way that they're worded will often guide you towards using particular tenses. For example, if a bullet point asks you to write about what you did last week, then it's going to be more natural to use past tenses. If a bullet point asks you about what you're going to do next summer, of course, it's more standard, more natural to use the future tense when answering that bullet point, even maybe the conditional or the similar tenses too. So pay attention to the wording of the precise bullet points, even when you're revising and practicing, and do avoid just sticking to, say, the present tense. You must use some variety of tenses if you want to get towards those top grades at all, even in the shorter writing task, even though you do not have to hugely vary your language here for the shorter writing task. Stick roughly to the word limit, as discussed, about 10% either way. That's the recommendation I would give. And again, you do not have to show off or vary your language too much. A little bit, definitely make sure you don't stick with just one tense like the present tense. Vary that a little bit. Make sure that your German is accurate above all, and that you've answered every single bullet point. Those things are really, really important. But as long as you do that, you can get right up to the top bracket of marks. You do not have to vary your language or use too many show-off phrases here in the shorter writing task. Okay, a few more tips when it comes to answering the shorter writing task. Make sure, of course, that you check through your work thoroughly afterwards. Of course, all of this work would have been written in German. And whenever you're writing in German, the main things to check for are the accuracy, which for the shorter writing task is the most essential thing, and the spelling, grammar, and punctuation, of course. Whenever you write in German, these are the main things to check for. And don't avoid checking or skip through it too quickly either. Most students, even the best ones, will usually come across some mistakes that they're then able to correct while they're checking. Memorize some key phrases. I mentioned this a lot, and for good reason. It's something I highly recommend to all students. Key phrases can be really, really useful. They can really boost a candidate's grade without too much extra effort at all. Key phrases, are more complex, more complex German phrases that can include harder parts of grammar, such as the subjunctive and various others as well. And they can even be memorized a day or two before the actual writing paper, so that you remember them as you're doing your writing paper. And even if you include a few of those in your writing, particularly actually in the longer writing task, but potentially in your shorter writing task as well, that can, of course, boost your marks. Make sure to indicate very clearly which question you've answered. It sounds obvious, but actually students every year will forget to do that and will end up being massively penalized or losing many marks, not because their German was necessarily bad at all, or not even because they didn't do any of the other exam technique that I've outlined here, but simply because they forgot to indicate or didn't indicate clearly which of the questions they were answering. Whenever you've got a choice of questions, you must indicate very clearly on the exam paper which one it is that you've chosen to answer. And if you don't, then the examiners, I believe, would normally have to assume that you've answered the first of those questions, which could lead to a lot of lost marks. So be careful about that, and of course, make sure to check that as well. And of course, practice using past paper materials in exam conditions. That last one is quite standard, particularly as you get closer to the final GCSE exams. I would really prioritize using past papers for practice and try and practice then in exam conditions as much as you can. Try and recreate the actual exam environment. And then try and mark it. And you'll know then what areas you have to work on. Okay, now it's time for me to show you a short example. This is the shorter writing task taken from sample material for AQA GCSE. And I'll just read out this question briefly. This is an example of the information that could be provided in the question itself, which says, you're writing to your Austrian friend about holiday activities. Write approximately 90 words in German. You must write something about each bullet point. And these are the 3 bullet points to include. Every single one of them must be included in your answer, of course. That is very important. So it says, describe where you spend the holidays, something you did in the holidays last year, and your plans for the summer holidays. So as I mentioned briefly, often the bullet points will guide you as to what tenses it may well be best to use when answering that bullet point. The first bullet point you'll notice is quite general, where you spend the holidays. So you might well use the present tense when answering that bullet point, although you can vary it as well. The next bullet point, the second one, is definitely geared towards past tenses because it asks about what you did last year. And the third bullet point is more focused on the future, your plans for the summer holidays. So you're more likely to use future tenses, maybe even the conditional, when answering that bullet point. So yeah, definitely watch out for those clues that the bullet points themselves can give you. Of course, the word count is really important, and that should be indicated very clearly within the question too. And make sure to pay attention to the details. For example, it says here that you're writing to your Austrian friend about holiday activities. And therefore, if you are asked to, say, write a letter or an email, you must make sure to address it to somebody and to set it out, as you'll see, a little bit like an email or a letter. Just with a greeting and a way of signing off at the end. Okay, let me show you my example answer. So you can see that I have copied out the question itself at the top, and my example answer is written below that in red. So I'll give you a little bit of time to read through that, and I'll just point out a few of the features of my answer, things that I've been careful to include. As mentioned, perhaps the first thing to say is that because here we are asked to write to an Austrian friend about holiday activities, I have been careful to set it out something like an email or a letter. You do not definitely have to write out things like the date or an address at all. The only thing I would do if you have to write something like a letter or email is I would address it to somebody, just because that complies with the instructions here. So here I've put, hello, Linda. What many people do is just choose a German, Austrian name or German or Austrian sounding name. A lot of them are the same as in English, actually. And they just make sure that whenever they have to write an email or letter, they write it to that same person. So they don't even have to think about the name. And whenever you're writing an email or letter, then make sure to sign off at the end, which I've done here with bis bald. See you soon. And then your own name, of course. Don't use mine, please. For the rest of the actual bulk of the content, you'll notice that I have answered every single bullet point. That is really important, as it says very clearly in the question itself. I've been careful to answer each bullet point roughly equally as well. I've written a bit more for the second and third, but the number of words, the word count for every bullet point will be more or less the same, not hugely different. I haven't written a huge amount more for one bullet point than I have for any of the other ones. And that is important. And I have varied my tenses to some extent too. As mentioned, that first bullet point is quite general. And so I've stuck with the present tense there, although I have used some perhaps slightly harder structures. Mit followed by the dative, for example. Genießen, that's perhaps a more advanced verb, to enjoy or to relish. And a verb kicker clause or a weil clause. Weil das Wetter schön und das Essen lecker ist, for example. In the second bullet point, for the second bullet point, I varied the tenses more, moving towards past tenses. And even within the past tenses, I varied the tenses a bit. So I haven't just stuck with, say, the one word simple past, for example, or imperfect. I've used the compound past tense too. For example, waren and ich bin gegangen. Those are two different kinds of past tenses. So again, showing a little bit more variety. I've used an zu construction as well, meaning in order to, einen spanischen Film zu sehen. A little bit of perhaps more complicated vocabulary, Erfahrung meaning an experience. And yeah, I've tried to introduce a little bit of vocabulary, mainly through grammar, a little bit in vocabulary too. And the same for the third bullet point. I've used subjunctive form, wenn ich die Wahl hätte, if I had the choice, followed by the conditional, würde ich diesen Sommer gerne in ein neues Land reisen. So again, just varying the language a little bit, so not showing off really hugely, because that's not even necessary in the shorter writing task to get towards top marks. And above all, particularly with German, which many students will find tricky, I've prioritized the accuracy and being careful about things like word order, which often trip students up. And making sure to avoid small mistakes. Okay, now there's just time for a quick quiz to test your understanding of the shorter writing task for German GCSE or iGCSE. Question number 1 of 4. So what should you look for while checking through your work? It may sound simple, but I'll give a few seconds to think. Okay, now here comes the answer. So if you're writing in German, you must always check that you've, of course, fulfilled the requirements of any question, while also checking through your spelling, punctuation, and grammar thoroughly. German spelling, punctuation, and grammar, particularly the grammar side and word order, does tend to be tricky for many students. And for that reason, it's all the more important to check through your work carefully and to even set aside some time to do so in the writing paper for both your shorter and your longer writing tasks. Question 2 is true or false. You do not have to address every single bullet point given for your shorter writing task. Is that one true or is it false? A few seconds of thinking time. Okay, now I will reveal the answer. So this one is, of course, false. Definitely something I stressed, I emphasized. Make sure that you answer every single bullet point when you answer the shorter writing task, because this is really important. Question 3, so true or false again. Topic-specific vocabulary is insignificant for your shorter writing task. Okay, I'm going to reveal the answer for that one already. So that one is also false. Each shorter writing task would be related to a particular topic area. So use topic-specific vocabulary for that topic. It can be very useful in a shorter writing task. And lastly, number 4, how much do you need to vary your language for the shorter writing task? This is something I mentioned. Try and think back to when I spoke about that. Okay, and I will show the answer for this one now as well. So you don't need to hugely vary the language for your shorter writing task. Some more advanced phrases can still be beneficial. Accuracy, however, and fulfilling the criteria and putting into practice the necessary exam technique, all of that, however, remains the most important here. So if you've got questions about any of that whatsoever, or if you'd like to know more about more personalized help, which I do also provide, you can get in touch with me by email, through Facebook, or Instagram. I do post on social media every single day, sharing my love of languages naturally with the world, hopefully inspiring people and motivating them to learn more languages. And I do post a lot about GCSE and iGCSE language papers too. For German and for other languages, including how to revise, how to make sure you know the necessary exam technique, fun revision methods, and a lot more. So don't hesitate to follow me on those platforms. I do have many resources, including free ones, available for German GCSE and iGCSE students, as well as students of other languages. So you can reach out to me to access those too. I do one-to-one classes, group classes, courses, and much more too. So don't hesitate to reach out if you'd like to know more of any of this.